Welcome to the Simplify Your Life podcast, where we talk about how to create a life you won't need an escape from. I'm Coach Simone, author of the book 111 Ways to Simplify Your Life, and I'm glad you decided to tune in. Now, before we get into status quo bias and some helpful examples when it comes to this cognitive distortion, I want to remind you that this is the 12th episode of my series on cognitive biases. And there will be 3 more to come in the upcoming months, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I will leave a link to them in the description box below. Now, before we explore status quo bias in depth, let's clarify what a cognitive bias actually means. A cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking that affects the decisions and judgments that you make. Another popular term that has the exact same meaning as cognitive biases is cognitive distortion. Now, as we mentioned, the cognitive bias we're going to explore in depth today is called status quo bias. What does this cognitive distortion actually mean? Status quo bias refers to having an emotional preference for the current situation, causing you to make non-rational decisions to stay where you are. For example, finding a new job is scary, so I'm going to stay in this one. Another example of status quo bias is when you go to the same restaurant and order the same meal every single time. Although you want to try something new, you prefer to order the safe option and keep the status quo instead of risking it. Status quo bias is at play here. When you're making the decision, you're not viewing the situation objectively. You're trying to keep yourself safe. And instead of going for something new and exciting, you prefer to do what you've always done so you don't disappoint yourself. As with any other cognitive bias, status quo bias can be difficult to detect. So we need to be aware of its manifestations to be able to spot our error in thinking and choose a better, more objective view of the situation. The question is, do we all struggle with status quo bias, or is that something that only happens to a handful of us? The short answer is probably yes. While we can't confirm that that is the case for every single person on planet Earth, it's definitely something that is quite common for us humans. We all have cognitive biases and blind spots. So although we may not struggle with status quo bias per se, we'll definitely have problems with other cognitive biases. I've actually made a free downloadable cheat sheet with the top 15 cognitive biases that might be holding you back. So if you want to download it, just click the link in the description box below or visit bit.ly/15biases. Now let's go back to status quo bias. Here are some examples to illustrate this bias. Let's say you have a subscription to a streaming service, and even though there are many other platforms, you stick with your current one simply because it's what you're used to. Another example of status quo bias is not being open to new ideas at work on how to do things better. There is an easy way to spot if that's what's going on. You might be having thoughts like, but we've always done it like that. Dealing with status quo bias doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you're being overly conservative or rigid when it comes to trying out new things. This is a cognitive bias, which means it's going to happen whether or not you want it to happen. So how can you change that? One thing you can do to become more aware of the status quo bias is to realize why it happens in the first place. As humans, we tend to always try to conserve energy and seek stability. The familiar feels safe and requires less mental effort than exploring new options. Status quo bias is often driven by our fear of making the wrong decision or having regrets. There is a direct correlation between dealing with status quo bias and our amygdala, which is a part of our brain responsible for processing emotions. It generates a sense of comfort and stability, making it difficult for us to break free from our current habits and routines. The more objective you are about your own cognitive biases, the easier it will be to spot status quo bias next time you feel hesitant to go outside your comfort zone and try out something new instead. As you can see, before we come to any conclusions, it will be beneficial to step back and view the situation objectively. So how can we do that? What can help a lot when it comes to spotting status quo bias is to ask yourself the following questions. 1. Is this a fact? 2. What evidence can I collect to support this statement? 3. Am I being rational here, or is this a cognitive bias? 4. If this is a cognitive bias, which one is it? These questions will make even more sense as we go deeper into the Cognitive Biases series. If you're curious to see what else we're going to cover in the next few months, make sure to download your free cheat sheet by visiting bit.ly/15biases. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please like it, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.